I think we're compelled to start the meeting. Thank you for starting the recording again, Josh. So it's just a moment or two after 2 o'clock, and we have some testimony to get through this afternoon after a very interesting morning. So the agenda has changed slightly. We will move Susan O'Connell from the 11:45 a.m. slot to follow Lisa Samet at 2:30. So we'll expect Susan around 2:45. So to keep that timetable going, Margaret, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Awesome. So I think you may have been here for the part of the earlier meeting, but I will repeat my general instructions, which are just be sure to introduce yourself and feel free to present your testimony in whatever way you feel comfortable. If you'd like to read it, that's fine. If you'd like to summarize it, that's fine. If you'd like to talk more generally around issues that are brought up by your written testimony or however you'd like to present that, I think we're all very interested. So you could start anytime.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I am going to read my testimony. My name is Margaret Woodruff, and I'm the director of the Charlotte Library in Charlotte, Vermont. I'm just going to close my door. Hang on one second.
Actually, folks, while Margaret's coming back, if you're not testifying, if you wouldn't mind just turning your camera off, that's probably good just to get the focus on the person who's talking. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm here today to talk about library collections. So I've sort of broken it down into 3 topics that are of importance, among many important to me. So the first is collection development. When I first started as a youth services librarian here at the Charlotte Library almost 20 years ago, I looked forward to the semi-annual materials review sessions with enthusiasm and expectation. While I eagerly, I was dedicated to developing library collaborations and sharing resources. The longer I got to be at the library, the more I realized what an important asset this type of offering was for all librarians, those new to the profession, such as I was at the time, and veterans alike. Title in a shared setting makes for a more generous and less threatening means of boosting the quality of collections at individual libraries and across the library community. You know, it was always so exciting to hear that someone else enjoyed a series that you did, or had patrons who really were interested in a particular topic. And, you know, to know even if your library might not have the resources to get something, you then knew where to go to get that, which was a great way to expand offerings at your library and also increase collaboration and sort of a fellowship, I guess you could say. The second topic I wanted to cover was collection-specific resources. We are very fortunate here to have a local history curator. This person brings interest and expertise to field questions from interested community members and visitors, as well as to teach other staff about the resources available in our library. I believe that funds and training should be allocated at a state level or from a state level to allow more libraries to foster and maintain curated local history collections. The staff position can be especially valuable to the library and community in partnership with a local history society, as well as in collaboration with the Vermont Historical Society. Such cooperation can further strengthen library ties within its own community, as well as throughout the state. And then the last topic that I felt was important was collection access. The library should not be a barrier to equity, but an open door to access. I think we all agree and share that mission. Emmanuel Acho, a former NFL player and author of Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man, described visiting a library when he was a young boy as like going to the airport with a passport, but without a ticket. Our job is to make sure that everyone has the ticket as well as the passport, making resources available for those who do not yet use the library is one key step. Collection development needs to be proactive and provide resources for all. This includes resources for community members who may not feel welcome due to language or technology barriers. It also includes potential members of our communities, such as refugees and new Americans. And I should add, I think this is something, again, that is a place where a lot of collaboration could help foster ties across the state. And that's my testimony for today. Thank you.
Oh, Margaret, we lost you there. Thank you so much for testifying. I think we may have some questions for you. I will open the floor to the working group. Any questions for Margaret? Andy, yes, please go ahead.
Just 1 minute, please. Sorry.
Yep.
Oh, not at all. Okay.
Yeah, it's just the same question I'm asking everybody.
No, it's good. I'm glad you're asking. It's good to get a baseline on that. I think Margaret's gotten.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got called away for a minute. Could you repeat that, please?
The life of a busy librarian.
Yeah, hang on, let me get my camera back on. Margaret, I've just been asking everybody who's testified who didn't include this information, if you can share any insight you have to patrons' use of digital materials compared to print materials, and trends you've seen.
Well, I think perhaps not a surprise, perhaps everybody has already said this, but the biggest trend has been due to COVID that we've got. You know, our digital use has increased at the same time that our print use has declined just because of access to the library. You know, we were open only 24 weeks last year, so that made a big difference in terms of, you know, people coming in and browsing and having access. But at the same time, I would say it also sort of presented a challenge to us as the staff, as how can we let people know about the collection and new books in our library if they're not, if the only thing we're offering is curbside service, what can we do to make that, you know, highlight what's coming in and that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you. And my second question that I have been asking everybody is reference materials and trends regarding digital versus print in your collection.
Yes, I would say most, well, as I mentioned, we have this Vermont history collection, so a number of our reference materials are specific to Vermont or even to Charlotte and don't typically circulate outside of the library. Our other materials are, we're relying more and more on digital just because of the accuracy of the information, you know, that it's the more up to date. I have to say that when we are open, you know, kids still love to come in and pore over atlases and look at things like that. So they think there's no substitute for that kind of reference material for sure.
Okay, thank you very much.
And if I could just add one thing about the digital materials, is that digital reference? Totally. Just, I think we've done a bit here with media literacy and information literacy, and I think that kind of has to go hand in hand with making digital materials available in particular.
Cool.
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
I loved your quote about the passport and not having a ticket. I think that is it's really pithy and accurate. So I think that we all know that libraries have not always been especially good at marketing themselves. And so to your point about reaching audiences that perhaps have not been engaged with the library. I think, this is an ongoing existential question for our libraries. And I think certainly my graduate school education did not have a lot of marketing in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's changed since I was in graduate school and library school, but I think that is something that we're seeing more and more, is that need not only to justify the library, but to expand the user base, and therefore not have it just be the librarians that are saying the library is important.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm leading somewhere, which is just to kind of expand on that point. But what do you think? What policy change could help with that? And are there some ideas that you have about how we could do that more statewide or even locally? It's a broad question, I know. And please answer in 2 minutes.
in terms of marketing and making things available. I think, well, one thing that comes to mind is the Vermont Library Association Public Library section put together a series of graphics that could then be tailored to individual libraries. But I think in a way that was a perfect example of, they developed these amazing things, but the Vermont Library Association did not do a great job of marketing these marketing materials. So that kind of, it was unfortunate that I think some libraries took it and ran with it and others did not, and maybe it's even having a workshop on how to tailor those to your particular library so that people, if they sign up for that, they know at the end they'll have the materials ready to go. And I think also really looking, the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission had a really interesting presentation on housing, which is related to libraries in many ways. But one of the things they said was about having materials available in different languages. And they said it isn't just enough to work with the community you have, but you have to work with the community that you will have. And I think that's another thing that's really important to think about, which I can't say we've done a fabulous job here, but it is on my mind.
That's great. Andy, you have your hand up. Did you have another question? We might have.
Sorry, I just forgot to put it down. I just forgot to put it down, and then I lost the window. So.
Okay, no, we're good. Anything else from the board? No. Thank you, Margaret, for taking the time out to do this. It's very important. Just really, really happy you could be here and share this with us.
Great. Well, thanks so much. And enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. Okay. Coming up next on the agenda is Mary Danko. Is Mary here? There's Mary. Also, if I could remind folks during testimony, if you're not, there you go. Yep, I think we're good. Mary, if you, I'll give you the same instructions I've been giving all day. Please introduce yourself, and then you can present your testimony in any way you like. Some folks have been reading it, others have been summarizing it and then adding stuff, or you can just talk generally relating to collections, whatever you like. Sound good?
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, great. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Mary Danko, and I'm the director of the Fletcher Free Library here in Burlington, Vermont. I'm sorry I didn't get to hear all the testimony today. I appreciate you all giving your time. It seems like it's a long day to listen to a lot of people talk, and I hope I'm not duplicating what you've heard. I did put in some written testimony. It's pretty long, and it was a great exercise for me to try and put into at least a kind of short document, what we do when it comes to collections, and it's pretty comprehensive. So for today, there's just a couple things I thought about that maybe I could expound a little bit more that wasn't in my written document. And one of the things is about the digital resources. And again, apologies if this has already been brought up, but just by way of an example, I'm going to give you a book, State of Terror by Louise Penny and Hillary Clinton. When the average person sees that on Amazon, they see the Kindle book is $15. For a library to purchase that book through our library vendor, it's $60. And that's only for 2 years. That's a license for 2 years. That same book to get through Amazon as an e-audiobook, Audible, is $18 for the average person. For a library, that e-audiobook from a library vendor is $100. And again, that license is only for 2 years. Another example is The Island of Missing Trees by Elif Shafak. And for example, on Amazon, you can buy that book, the ebook for $9.45. For a library, that book is $63. And now that particular copy we would have in perpetuity. It's a one copy, single use. For the e-audiobook through Amazon, $28.35. Any, go on there now, you can buy it for that much. For a library to buy it from a library vendor, $148. So I give you these two examples for a couple reasons. First of all, there is a variety of purchasing options that we as librarians have to navigate in this digital collection world. Two, there's fluctuating prices all the time, and there's a myriad of reasons for that. And three, there's limited sharing that we can do even amongst each other when we buy these types of digital resources. So as one person described it to me, it's a volatile market, and it has been a volatile market since, the early 2000s when we started buying these digital resources. So it's really, really challenging. And I don't know exactly what all the answers are, but we really need to work better together to be providing these digital resources. And I think there are economies that we can achieve if we've got some funding and some leadership to bring it all together. And I think there's ways that we can expand what we offer. And I think that's kind of one of the main themes throughout, my thinking when I think about collections is, we're a state of about 650,000 somewhere in there people, which is, not incredibly big compared to some other counties that are out through the United States that have worked together to provide economies of scale that, with those bigger purchasing powers, we can do better in what we offer Vermonters. Our philosophy as libraries is sharing, and we can have this sharing economy, but we've got a lot of the infrastructure there, but we need to expand it. We need to make it bigger. We need to make it better, not just for our digital collections, but for our physical collections. And I really think, we can get there. And I think that could be a really a huge economic benefit for everybody, but it is going to take that initial investment of time, of money, leadership, and strategy. But if we can do that, I think there's lots of ways that we can improve collection sharing among all libraries within the state. And finally, I'll just say, kind of connected to this, libraries have always been about equity, and especially making our collections available to everybody is critically important. And I do sometimes worry, and I'm mindful of, as we are moving on to these digital resources, how do we keep ensuring that that equity piece is being upheld? So that's it, and I hope I've left a little bit of time for questions.
Thank you, Mary. Really interesting. I see Denise has a question. Yes, please go ahead, Denise.
Hi, thanks so much, Mary. I'm Denise and I work at the university. And I'm so glad you brought up the point about licensing and licensing costs and how they vary often amongst different entities who are trying to negotiate licenses, and we're not even generally allowed to disclose the specifics of what we're paying to each other due to non-disclosure agreements that are often embedded in those contracts. And as you mentioned, I'm aware in academia of different groups like the Big Ten libraries in Illinois who have gotten together to actually do consortial licensing together. Do you have examples of public libraries that have been successful within states or within regions that we could look to get some good advice as to how to proceed with something like that?
Yes, so right now we have the Green Mountain Library Consortium that was started back, I think it's over 10 years old. And it's not every library in the state. It's just the libraries that are members. And so I think what happens is we're a little bit disjointed because of that, because we have many libraries that are members and some that aren't. And then because they're a small volunteer-run organization, they can only do so much. So then some of us have to go off on our own. So like here at Fletcher, we've got a few of those digital resources that we're getting on our own. And I know we probably could be paying less if we could harness the buying power of a larger group. We just don't have the capacity to, every time we want something, to go out and be like, okay, who can we get now to join us? And then, dealing with the salesman and like, okay, what's your population served or how many active library cards? But I think there's great potential there. Does that answer your question, I hope?
Yeah, no, it definitely does. And I know, like, I work in medical librarianship, 90% of our materials are licensed electronic materials. So when I think collections, personally, I'm thinking really electronic, and a lot of what you've brought up relates to the challenges that I face in academia as well. So it's good to hear. I keep forgetting we're all in the same boat in many ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
Meg, I see you have a question.
Great. Hi. Thanks. Hi, Mary. I'm a school librarian at U32, and I'm curious about, like, ebooks have to be read on devices. So, what sort of devices are you lending at Fletcher Free? And that certainly is an issue of equity as well. Like, ebook prices aside, so many folks don't have the devices on which to read them. So speak a little bit about what your approach is at Fletcher Free.
Sure. Yeah. So here at Fletcher, we aren't lending any devices. Again, our capacity is kind of limited to manage those. Although this year we just have added to our collection laptops and hotspots, so people can use a laptop and do some e-reading online. And also I'm sure we could figure out ways to have them listen to the MP3s or whatever. So that has been a great addition to our collection. But it took us a while to get there. I mean, there were definitely other libraries in the country that were doing those loans earlier. And again, it's the capacity to get those programs started. So I often feel like, boy, if there was 20 other libraries that we were all doing this together, we could help each other, we could support each other. But the response that we've been getting on that particular collection has been overwhelmingly positive.
Great, thanks, Mary.
Thank you.
Andy, yeah, I'll get to you in a moment. I just wanted to put a plug in for GMLC because I think they've reached just about every library that's interested in participating. Last I knew there were 160 libraries participating in Listen Up Vermont, which is very impressive. I will note that I feel like I keep saying this at every meeting, but we are this close to having contracts finalized with ebook and audiobook vendors, which I think will at least begin to address some of what you're talking about. I'm sorry I can't go into more detail, but hopefully within the next couple of weeks we'll be able to do that. But I think I feel like there's a couple systemic issues here, which are the state of the publishing industry in relation to libraries and the high cost of ebooks and audiobooks. It just, when you're paying for that license and paying $120 for a book that you only have for 26 checkouts or 2 years. It just feels somehow unjust, especially since only one person at a time can check them out, right? So yeah, it just, there's something inherently wrong with that model. And then of course, the cost of actually maintaining a ebook and audiobook platform that has enough new stuff at those prices to keep the holds down low enough that people want to use it and don't go elsewhere for those titles is prohibitive. So I'm not sure that I was asking a question, but I think we're in agreement here on that. And with that, unless you have a comment, I'll let Andy ask his question.
Well, I just have one quick comment on that. I would say the other problem is we don't get a lot of the data. So my issue sometimes with these vendors that we have to deal with is I can't see, like, I know that Amazon knows when somebody stops reading at page 13. I know, they have there's all kinds of data that I feel like I could be a better negotiator if I could say, hey, look, yes, you're charging us this much money and we get 26 checkouts, but guess what? 10% of my checkouts aren't getting read past the first chapter, So there's another thing that they do is they lock up that data on us, and that way we're not in the best negotiating position. I want to do right by publishers and authors too, but I want it to be a fair conversation.
Great point, Andy.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. That was super interesting, and the issue of disparate pricing is always vexing to me too. So I'm glad to hear something about that. Just the question I've been asking everybody to get a baseline sense from at least the people who supplied testimony is your sense of circulation relative digital versus print and how it's changed over time.
Yeah, so I would say we've definitely see, when audiobooks came on, people adopted, and that's still, I see still that growing at our library. Like it seems like people are voracious for e-audiobooks. We have Overdrive through GMLC, and we also have Hoopla, and our stats, I just looked at them, keep going up. The ebook market has been different. When those came on, that grew, but it is kind of plateaued a little bit. I haven't seen that as much of a growth area for us. But I will say, this is indefinitely during COVID, what happened is people who were reluctant to use those services, I call them the late adopters, they eventually came on. The struggle with that for us was, boy, that takes a lot of hand holding. Like our librarians worked really hard to bring these late adopters, onto this. And, and now we're kind of seeing a little bit of, people are so sick of looking at screens. They want they want to go back to the books, the tactile books. So in the ebook market, I still see a little bit of people who want to use the hard, the paper, physical books and the ebooks. But gosh, that e-audiobook market just keeps continuing to grow, which I see as a good thing because people are realizing that reading just doesn't mean reading a book. Audiobooks are so important for so many learners who are auditory learners or for other physical reasons. They're still capturing, as folk life, the richness of those stories and the richness of the language. It's just coming to a different way. And so people are discovering that still. And of course, they're using them on commutes and when they travel and when I know people who listen while they clean the house, and it's really uplifting to think, boy, these people are still taking in this information just in a different way.
Cool, thank you. And then my other consistent question is reference materials and how the collection's been developing regarding digital versus print.
So I would say digital is really much more important to us now. Our physical collection is, gone way down. And I would say, again, this is where we rely on the state a lot because they provide us with the Gale databases. So not only is that a great reference for our patrons, but our reference librarians use it. But I don't know if you guys have talked about this at all, but these services you build them modular, right? So we've got a basic public library, suite that we can go to, but boy, we could sure expand on that. We could get more academic journals in there, more peer-reviewed journals. And as when we talk about, the misinformation and disinformation that's out there, having that availability is even more important than ever. So I'd love to see more of that, more expanded, but it is timely, it's curated, and there's good information in there. And I think it's critical that every library has, good, broad, and deep access to that.
Great, thank you very much.
Jeanette, you have a question?
Well, I wanted to thank Mary for bringing up the issue of the prices and all on the digital. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know the antitrust laws, but it certainly seems to me that the ebook and e-audiobook industry is ripe for charges of price fixing, and really should be some federal legislation. The prices charged to libraries are just exorbitant, and it seems to be across the board. I know at one time, Overdrive seemed to be, the only actor out there. You paid their prices or you didn't have services. And when you pay the exorbitant prices, it was more like a lease. If you decided to change service companies, you couldn't take those publications that you paid for with you. You had to walk away and leave them behind. All of this, I find extremely upsetting. I realize that ALA is not going to lead a strike and convince libraries they weren't going to purchase next year in order to drive the prices back to a reasonable place. But I think there should be something that can be done. The industry is holding all the cards where it comes to electronic publications. I mean, if you buy a print book, you can give it away. You can sell it on a secondary market. None of this you can do with electronic. There should be more equity between them. So I'll get off my soapbox, but I do think it's something that ought to be looked into, because it's not survivable for small libraries.
Yeah, I'll add a couple things to that. One is, with one of the vendors, Overdrive, we can buy our own. We're part of a consortium. We all share the collection, but some of us libraries are part of an advantage program, which means we can buy our own individual copies to satisfy our holds. And then if we don't use them, or it starts to get very complicated, frankly, then we can share our copies with the consortium. So to me, there's also problems with the limits on the way we can share. And again, I think the technology is a little bit behind on that, because we should be able to pool our resources and share better. The other problem when I was getting with the data, and which kind of makes me a little squeamish when we're going to have another competing service that gives ebooks or e-audiobooks, is if I have a patron who puts holds on, the same book and on this with this vendor, and that the same book with this vendor, and then they're on hold and they're waiting, and then the book becomes available with this vendor first, so they take it, and then they've got the book, and then the book becomes available on the second vendor, and then they take it, and then they're like, oh, I didn't really need it because I have it on this one. The average person doesn't realize, boy, you've just tied up now those two licenses. And I can't blame them. Like, it's complicated, they're going to have all this to negotiate. And again, because I don't have that data, I can't say, hey, look, 30% of my holds aren't getting picked up, just because either people, don't, or I shouldn't say that. 30% of my holds are getting picked up, but they're not actually even being read, right? So I don't have that data. So, it just, the more that we I think the bottom line is the more that we can work together, the better we are, and we come from a place of strength. I hear what Jeanette is saying. I think and we do see some states that are out there that are starting to sue regarding some of these practices. I think there are some higher level policies and laws that need to be pursued and enacted. But in the meantime, on the Vermont level, I hope we can get a place to keep working towards better shared collections when it comes to these digital collections.
I want to announce the new platform so bad right now, but I can't. We're just not there yet. But I will tell you that I believe that what we're doing will solve that problem of the multiple vendors holds issue that you're talking about. I think
good.
that we may actually be able to get that into one stream for folks. So I think it could be good.
Well, great. I appreciate that. You guys being mindful about that.
Oh yeah. We're trying to. We're looking for exactly what you just described, and I think we're all working toward that. Soon, and I'm getting some digital pokes in the ribs here to not reveal any more details. So, there was another point I was going to make beyond that. But anyway, this has been great. I was thinking of the Macmillan thing, and of course the Maryland law, which essentially compelled Amazon to make their ebooks available to libraries because they said that they were going to not sell to libraries. So the Maryland law stated that if you want to do business and sell ebooks and audiobooks in the state, you have to also offer them to libraries at a reasonable cost. Now, I think what we think of as a reasonable cost is significantly less than what we've been talking about today, but at least those laws are being picked up in other states, and I certainly hope to see a law like that within the next couple of years in Vermont as well. So just keep the playing field even, at least, even if we are fighting uphill, or some mixture of metaphors there. So, Mary, Jeanette, did you have another question? I think Jeanette's hand is still up.
Sorry, no.
Okay, great. All right. Mary, thank you so much. This was really interesting, and we appreciate you taking time out to join the group. And please feel free to stay for the rest of the afternoon session. And we're a little behind schedule here, so I want to keep moving, but thank you again, Mary.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone.
Lisa Samet. Lisa, are you here?
I haven't spotted her in the list.
Okay. We did have a slight schedule change with her. Susan, are you here? Would you like to start 5 minutes early? Can we do that?
Sure, that'd be fine.
Great. Thank you for being so flexible today. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. I've been here all day. It's been really fascinating to hear everyone else's comments before making my own comments. So actually, I really appreciate kind of batting cleanup here. So my name is Susan O'Connell. I'm the director of the Craftsbury Public Library in Craftsbury, Vermont. I describe our library as one of the larger small libraries in the state. And it's been interesting today to hear from everyone else, most of whom are larger libraries. Not everybody, but most of what we've been hearing has been from the larger libraries around. A lot of what I'm experiencing here at our library is the same or similar, but there are also some differences that I think are important to bring up. And I appreciate having an opportunity to represent some of the small libraries in the community. So rather than reading my testimony, I'll go over the two pieces that I really was trying to focus on in the testimony and highlight some things that others have talked about and try to really maybe dig down a little bit deeper in some areas. So I'm really looking at the the idea of collections, both from a local standpoint and from a collaborative standpoint. And a few other librarians brought up the materials review workshops that we used to have in this state as an important piece of their collection development strategy. I also wanted to highlight that and go into a little bit more depth about why I felt like that was such an important piece to have. Let's see. We never did have a similar resource like that for the adult collection. So why, the question that I always come back to is, why did I feel like it was so important for the juvenile collection when I didn't feel like it was so important for the adult collection? And there are a couple of reasons for that. One big difference between the adult and the juvenile collection is that our young readers are aging in and out of their collection very quickly. So, for an example, I have one of my readers of my adult fiction collection who moved to Craftsbury as a young bride at 22 years old, and she's 90 now, and she's still reading from the same collection. My collection has to always be refreshing and renewing because we do have patrons like that who've been reading forever. It's not enough just to have the best, it has to also be always the newest, it has to always be refreshing. In the juvenile collection, if you've got a young reader starting in on early readers, well, they'll be reading that collection for 6 months, maybe 12 months, and then they've moved on to something else. So you really can curate a fine collection. It can be more static, but then it means it can be great. You know, in an ideal world, you can really have the best of the best. So having the materials review option to have somebody who's really looking at what is the best that's coming out was really helpful in order to be able to build juvenile collections. Another piece that I think is also really important, and perhaps much more so for smaller libraries than for large libraries, is the idea of where the responsibility for collection development falls. And in many of our small libraries, collection development for the juvenile collection falls to the children's librarian, which is in many cases the most appropriate place for it to be. At the same time, a lot of our children's librarians haven't had the opportunity to have the same sort of education in collection development in other library skills as library directors have had. So we have incredibly vibrant, creative, energetic, passionate children's librarians who are open to ideas, intelligent, thinking through things, but they might not have the background information, and having someone who can help to guide that, I think, is really especially important. When we're thinking about changes in collections, especially, that's a really valuable piece. The first time I ever heard the term everyday diversity, it came through a materials review session, and it was something that I hadn't thought about. I was a new young librarian without a lot of background knowledge, and the concept was excellent, but it had to be brought to my attention. I didn't come to my position with that. As we're all really working to improve our collections in terms of equity, diversity, and inclusion, having someone who can help to guide that would be a really valuable and useful resource. It provided, I suppose you could say, it provided a safety net. Materials review was a place where the things that we might not have noticed, or that maybe we should be paying attention to, but we haven't figured that out yet, got brought to our attention. So it was really valuable in terms of ensuring better access for all Vermonters to a really high quality collection. And so moving from that kind of inward looking local collection out into the statewide collaborative idea, it's really heartening to hear so many people talking about the idea of having a better statewide collaborative system. But I think that's an idea. It's something that I've been thinking about and wanting for a long time, but I think the time maybe has come. I certainly hope that it has. Just as an example for this is something, as I was completing my master's degree, I did an independent study that was a comparison of the libraries of the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont with the County Kerry library system in Ireland, known as the Kingdom of Ireland. These two geographic regions are similar in many, many ways, have a lot of similar challenges, but they have incredibly different library systems. So it was fascinating to really dig down into that information. But as I was talking with my mentor and going over this report that I was writing, one of the things that I wrote about was the Kerry library system and their incredible ability to provide anything that's available in the entire country to a library user, and how amazing that was. With their system, you look and you can see what's available in your own library, your home library and your county library, but it also shows everything that's available anywhere. So sitting on a mountainside in the southwest of Ireland in County Kerry, you can see everything that's available in Dublin, and you can click the button and say, yes, I want that. And within a few days, it will be available at your home library. Amazing, just extraordinary. Well, I was describing this and my mentor looked at me and she said, Susan, that's not extraordinary. That's how the world works. It's just that it doesn't work in Vermont. So I'm hoping that that's something that we will work in Vermont, that we can get to. And I know Tom has said today, and he said to me in the past, this is not something that the Department of Libraries can dictate, and that's absolutely true. But I'm hopeful that the Department of Libraries can provide leadership on that. And I'm wondering if there is a place where the working group can help with that. I don't really know what our report can do for that, but if there's a way that we can help to move this idea forward, I certainly hope that we do that. And I guess I'll leave it saying that in Vermont, our Vermont motto is freedom and unity. And I think we talk a lot about the independence of all of our small Vermont libraries, and that's absolutely true, and it's absolutely important. But I think there's place for both independence and collaboration, or for freedom and unity, in order to move this idea forward. So I hope that we do get there. And I guess with that, I'll take questions.
Thank you, Susan. Some great points in there. I'm sure that stimulated some interesting thoughts and questions. Let's give the working group the opportunity to ask any questions. Andy?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all, anybody who's been watching for a while knows what I'm going to ask. So, we're going to start with that, but here to the notion of freedom and unity, and interpreting that as both collective and individual, and balancing those things, because I think that's sometimes something people forget. So in regard to your collection and circulation and use of materials, just how trends regarding digital and print.
I'm really glad you asked that question, actually. We've heard from a lot of larger libraries, and as a smaller library, I think I have a very different question. And the short answer is that our library is not a part of any digital services, and we don't provide those services. Now, of course, it's never really a short answer to a question like that. And one of the things that we've been working with in this area is, because we don't yet have access to a larger collaborative system up here in the Northeast Kingdom, where we're more independent than most places, we went rogue in this area, and we've created what we're calling, we call it local system, Libraries of Craftsbury and Albany, LOCAL, local. So I'm the largest of the 3 libraries in Craftsbury and Albany, but still a tiny library with a very small budget. What we've done is we've worked together as Albany and also the Simpson Library in East Craftsbury both started to work towards automating their collection. The cost of having an integrated library system was just not possible with their tiny, tiny budgets. So we folded those 2 libraries into our library catalog. At the same time, the Albany Library started offering digital services. And so we have the same catalog, we have the same patron database, we have the same patrons. This is one of the economies of scale that just makes no sense in Vermont right now. So many libraries are sharing patrons and all paying for those patrons in different places. Well, there's no reason for Craftsbury to be paying for the same 1,000 patrons as Albany is paying. So Craftsbury pays for the integrated library system. Albany pays for the Listen Up Vermont services. So our patrons have access to those services. They just don't have access to them through us. It's a Band-Aid, honestly. It's not the best system, but it's what we have for now, and it's the only way that we can provide what our patrons need at this point.
Well, I mean, that's terrific to hear. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it very much. Then as far as reference materials, same thing, just access to digital reference versus and print and holdings of print versus digitals too. That's something I'm curious about.
Exactly. So all that we have for digital reference services are what is provided through the Department of Libraries. And that's incredibly valuable to have that kind of as a backstop. We have something available to our patrons, and otherwise there would be nothing available to our patrons. So that's an example of where things are working really well already on a statewide basis. In terms of print reference, we don't have a reference collection per se at all anymore. We have a strong nonfiction collection, but for reference books specifically that reside within the library and are only used in certain ways, that's something that we don't have at all.
Okay, thank you very much.
Meg, you have a question.
Great. Thanks, Tom. Hi, Susan.
Hi, Meg.
How you doing?
All right.
My question, you raised a really interesting thought for me, which was around, like, you had gone to a professional development session and learned about a concept or a term or something around diversity, I think you had said.
The everyday diversity?
Yes.
Right.
And that was through professional development?
That was first brought up during materials review, actually. It was, it was a concept that I hadn't heard talked about before. It was an obvious idea, and it was something that, I appreciated within books, but didn't know there was a term for, and I wasn't actively going out and thinking about that during my collection development process.
Great. And because of your own curiosity about that term and wanting to know what it meant, you on your own time then sought that out, got your own knowledge. And so what I'm curious about, because what we've heard from some other librarians is like collection development or curating collections can often be purposeful, or it can be dictated by a librarian's own personal interests. So if a librarian happens to be invested in centering historically marginalized voices, bringing in anti-racist texts, for example, they'll do that, whereas somebody else might be focusing on mysteries and romance. So my question is, like, what are some topics do you think are essential that we could embed into professional development opportunities for public librarians as things to think about as they build their collections?
Well, I guess first I just clarify, When I was first hearing about everyday diversity, it wasn't just something that I heard talked about in materials review, but it was something that Grace Green was doing those materials review sessions at the time. And she was doing more than just bringing up this is an everyday diversity book, but she was saying, this is something we need to all think about. Like, this is what it means, and here's an example, and you know why a snowy day is so important. Think about that when you go back to your collections. So it really was, it was a much more directed concept to really push us all to be thinking about this at a time when it was an idea that was just coming to the fore. And I guess I would use this, the rest of your question there as my opportunity to get on my soapbox about concepts of diversity. I think we're doing an excellent job really reviewing how diversity looks in terms of gender inclusivity, in terms of skin color, in terms of many other pieces that we hadn't thought about before. And the pieces that I really hope that we think a lot more about and work a lot more on are socioeconomic diversity, and that rural urban divide, or in Vermont, maybe just rural, not quite so rural divide. But those ideas of looking at poverty, looking at the differences are, they're not the most well-known pieces of diversity, but they're ones that really matter in our communities, and finding materials that relate to those topics are challenging, very challenging.
No, I really appreciate the clarification too, Susan. I know Grace Green's done so much, just naturally embedding a lot of concepts into those materials review. It's just not a showcase of titles, but the frameworks that support, a purposeful collection building. And I really appreciate the insights around providing some more socioeconomic lenses and framing about our inequities and providing those materials for our communities. So keep up the good work up in Craftsbury. It's going to be a snowy weekend.
I see Kelly has a question just before you ask, Kelly. I want to mention, I know Joy's been here most of the day. I don't think she's in the meeting right now, but she's in. She runs our continuing ed program, and as part of that program coming up, we're going to offer 20 slots to a building diverse collections workshop that's coming up in March. So look for that. I think that's kind of right in line with what you're talking about here. So keep an eye out. Actually, no, Joy is here, so keep an eye out for that. But Kelly has a question.
Sorry, mine's more of a statement. I just wanted to thank Susan for coming and giving testimony today. I think it's really important that we hear from some of the smaller libraries because oftentimes they do get overlooked, or it's mostly larger libraries that we hear from. And also that I appreciate that you guys have found a temporary fix for your issue there in your community, but it does point to the larger problem at hand that we need to address. So, but thank you very much.
Thanks, Kelly.
Agreed. That I think sometimes we look at that fundamental tension between liberty and unity and find ourselves a little bit lost. But I just want to make a comment. I see Jeanette has a question, but I do want to make a comment, which is that to your point about what's possible, I think a big part of what this working group can do is to set up those guideposts and pointers toward maybe some more regional or statewide cooperative stuff, right? Especially collections is something that we've talked about, and I think your experience in Ireland is like mine in California or right. Connecticut, like we mentioned earlier, where you can just go on and check something next to a book that's in a different library and then it appears for you. And so I think that that felt a little far away a few years ago, but it feels closer. And sometimes I have to remind myself, and I think that it's easy for us to get into the kind of thinking that some hills are just so tall and difficult to climb. And I think if you look at where we were 10 years ago, we had VALs, right?
Right, we've come a long way.
We didn't have a courier system. We were charging libraries for Vermont Online Library. That's now completely free and statewide. And I think there's some other changes that have happened that have been fairly revolutionary over the last few years. So let's, I want to keep that spirit going. And I think that this working group is an incredible opportunity to continue to do that. So, Jeanette, did you have a question?
Well, I wanted to thank Susan for bringing up materials review. It's not the first time that we've heard it brought up today. I've heard grumblings ever since Grace's retirement that was a program that got dropped there at the Department of Libraries. And I'm hoping that, through this working group and all that will, be noted as a, significant offering for the departments of libraries to restart a similar program. I mean, they won't have Grace, but I'm sure somebody can step up to it. And I hope that will be something that can come out of the working group's recommendations.
And certainly in terms of helping to support small libraries, I'm thinking about that. I think it's well worth reconsidering. Sometimes we don't know what we need until we don't have it anymore, and then it's time to reconsider it and take a second pass at things.
Yeah, well, particularly all of the small libraries that don't even have a children's librarian and are relying on one part-time librarian to be everything. And I think a lot of times it's the ability to spend the time looking at all the new offerings in the children's literature that falls through the cracks. And that materials review really helped fill those cracks.
Exactly. That's definitely the case in our library. I do the collection development for both the adult and the juvenile collection, but I have to have new things for the adult collection. And I know that we have a decent juvenile collection. So when I run out of time, it's the first thing that goes. And certainly there are other great resources that I can go to and sometimes do, but having that as a backstop, as a safety net, just to quarterly be able to say, okay, here's the best stuff. Okay, I can start with that. It was invaluable.
Exactly.
Your comment about an adult materials review is very interesting because I was talking with some of my colleagues during the break, and we were discussing the fact that we did not have an adult materials review in the same way that we had for juvenile books. So it was an interesting synchronicity there.
We did used to have at the VLA conference, what was it called? There was always reviews of books by like 3 or 4 different librarians.
It's called rapid reviews. Rapid reviews.
Rapid reviews, yes.
Yes. But it was just once a year. But it served the same purpose, but it wasn't. It was always wonderful to have, but it didn't feel as necessary.
Well, this has been great and good information, and we will certainly take that into consideration. Yeah, in fact, Jeanette has already noted that she will take all of that under consideration, so thank you. We have, I'm still looking for Lisa. Have you seen her yet, Josh?
I have not seen her yet, I don't believe.
Okay. Well, I think that this moves us a little forward on the agenda to anyone who's here who would like to offer any comments or additional testimony, who had submitted written testimony or just public comment at this point. So any comments, and that can include just general comments from the working group as well about the testimony today. Okay, yep, it has been a long meeting today, and thank you all so very much for being here. I feel like we've gotten a lot done today. It's been extremely interesting listening to our colleagues who are sharing their experience. So for admin time and preparation for next meeting, I think we can look at a couple of dates. If possible, I would love to be able to set the next meeting date in this meeting. I think we have most of the folks here who are members of the working group, so maybe we can at least set a fairly solid tentative date. Fridays tend to work well, I think, for folks. So I was looking at either March 18th or the 25th for a similar format, a 10 to 4 meeting with perhaps a 2-hour break in the middle. Is there a preference for either the 18th or the 25th of March?
25th is better.
25?
18 is better for me, but it can be worked out.
Okay. Do you want to do rock, paper, scissors on that one?
Yes.
Yeah, what I have is flexible. So if yours isn't, I can.
I have a kid off from school.
Yeah, no, totally. So I'll just, we can just say the 25th and I'll.
25? Okay.
I already warned the people who were having that meeting that's scheduled in there that I might not be able to make it, so.
Okay, does the 25th work for everyone else? It works for me.
Yes, it works.
Works for me.
Thank you.
Yep.
Sounds good.
Okay, we'll put that in as the tentative date. And then if there's a change, please let us know in the next couple of days, because the nice thing about having these meetings is bi-monthly is that they're out far enough usually that we can kind of put them on your calendar and not have them get overwritten. So we will plan on March 25th from 10 to 2 and a similar format to this. Karen, yes.
Just a question. Do you suppose that for the meeting on the 25th, we will follow the same sort of timing format? I'm just trying to figure out how much time to block out on my calendar. 10 to 4 for the March meeting?
Yeah, exactly. I felt like this worked well today. And in fact, we're wrapping up a little bit early. I don't have the legislation in front of me. Do we know what the next topic is? Let me see if I can pull that up.
I believe the next one is facilities, if I'm reading it correctly.
Oh, well, that should be very interesting. we might need all of our time for that one. Collections was awesome today. It was so great to hear people's perspectives. Christopher says he's out of town. Okay. Majority rule. Okay. Well, we'll go with the 25th, and Christopher, if your plans change or anything changes, then we'll work with that. But facilities, so we'll put something on the website and send out a meeting notice for March 25th. We'll block out that whole 10 to 2 time. Karen, is your hand still up? Is that what's going on there?
So I lowered it and then I put it up again because I thought of another question.
All right.
Did we want to spend, I know that it's Friday and folks are anxious to get away, but did we want to spend just 5 minutes talking about revisiting the discussion from the very beginning of the meeting about what the structure of what we submit at the end of this process might be, or how we want to start planning for what that is?
Yes. Tell me your thoughts.
Well, first I have a question because I came to the group late, so I missed your very first sort of organizing meeting. So could you give me the one sentence? What does the legislature expect to receive from us? A written report of some sort, I would imagine, with a recommendation of some sort?
Yeah, a written report. I think it's in the legislation. Let me just pull that up. It's really better if we just read what it actually says, because it's pretty succinct in the legislation. Report. So section H. On or before November 1st, 2023. Though, could somebody mute who's got all that noise? Thanks. On or before November 1st, 2023, the working group shall submit a report to the House and Senate Committees on Education. The report shall contain 1. Specific and detailed findings and proposals concerning the issues set forth in the information listed above, meaning all of the things that we're hearing testimony about. 2. Recommendations for updating the statutes, rules, standards, and the governance structures of Vermont libraries to ensure equitable access for Vermont residents, efficient use of resources, and quality in the provision of services. 3. Recommendations relating to the funding needs of Vermont libraries, including capital, ongoing, and special funding. And 4, any other information or recommendations that the working group may deem necessary. So we have a pretty broad mission for that report. Denise.
Thanks for reading that again. It's really helpful to hear it. I'm wondering, this testimony is so valuable, but I feel like we're going to end up with certain gaps in our understanding, especially because we're looking at so many different types of libraries. And I wonder if there's a way to organize ourselves so that some of us could be out there trying to, I don't know, identify what those gaps are and fill them, or maybe as a group we can identify the gaps, and then some of us can volunteer to try to go gather information from those who we might not be hearing from within the testimonies.
I think that's a fantastic idea. I think that we're seeing that we're not really hearing from academic libraries. I know that Bryn did put in a piece of written testimony this time, which is fantastic. But this charge is for all libraries in Vermont, so I do want to underscore that. I think that the working group is composed in such a way that we, through our networks, can reach a lot of different people. And to your point, I think that is a great idea. The problem with open meeting law, of course, is that to the extent that we can plan outside of these meetings is limited. So there's a certain degree of independence, I guess, for each member, if that makes sense. I have sort of just, taken the lead by setting the agenda and doing those things, but I really like this question. Other thoughts about this?
No, thank you, Denise. Yeah, I'd offered early on and just lack focus that I'm happy in my professional capacity this is Andy, to reach out to certain libraries if we can compose a list and a series of questions and basically do interviews to do some data gathering. I'm happy to do that. Just need guidance.
What about a survey?
So Tom, sorry.
Yes, please
it's
go ahead.
Karen. I just wanted to say, so I like the idea of the survey in that it could help to structure a conversation, but similar to what Andy said about doing some kind of interview, I feel like for folks who haven't responded to our requests for written testimony or in-person testimony, they're likely also not going to fill out a form. It's like sometimes that sort of personal appeal, although it takes a really long time, is what it takes to get testimony from those folks who don't jump to give it the first time around. And then the second point I had was sort of a clarifier. I think the date in the legislation for the final report to be due is November of 2023. And so it seems like it gives us some time after collecting all the testimony in which to put something together. But are we limited to the number of meetings? I know there's a list of things we have to collect on. I think the number of meetings we've been allocated is likely the number of things we're supposed to take testimony on plus one or two more, if I'm remembering right. Are we limited to not having meetings other than those? And so would that report writing part like yuckily have to maybe happen just via email? Because if we can't convene a meeting to all be together so that we don't infringe on open meeting.
Right. Yeah, that's the problem. We do have a couple meetings on the back end. I think 3 meetings on the back end to kind of pick up any testimony and then be able to meet and discuss issues. But there's a point where you're considered if you hit a quorum of folks. I'm not exactly sure. April might know, she's in the meeting. She knows open meeting law better than I do. But we can't like meet and not have it be an official meeting.
Sure. I wonder about, because I'm a real process person, so I wonder about not getting too far into the weeds, but thinking about setting some deadlines for some smaller groups of people to start sort of collating the testimony, coming up with some ideas that were suggested by folks who testified, / coming up with some ideas that seem to come up in our own discussions, and sort of pre-writing kind of an outline that could then be discussed by that full group, but take a lot of that kind of pre-writing stuff offline, and then bring that back to the whole group for fuller discussion, and then send it back for a rewrite kind of thing.
You know, Josh just actually chatted me something that may be very important. Let me read section J. We may have to ask our attorney about this, but compensation and reimbursement. Members of the working group shall be entitled to per diem compensation and reimbursement of expenses as permitted under 32 VSA, blah, 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 for not more than 12 meetings. These payments shall be made from monies appropriated to the Department of Library. So our appropriation of $12,000 is more than adequate to pay for that. So members of the working group shall be entitled to per diem compensation reimbursement of expenses as permitted for not more than 12 meetings. But that doesn't mean that we couldn't have more meetings where there's no per diem.
Right.
That's what I'm hearing.
Oh, sorry. This is Karen again. Feeling like it would be beneficial to do a lot of that process together, not the writing piece, because that's like a drudge to try to do that in such a big group, but have a lot of that discussion in a meeting setting, not try to do it back and forth over email, which can be also very painful.
Yeah, I mean, both have pros and cons. So let's think about this. So when people were invited to be on the working group, they were told there would be 12 meetings. So I am aware of that, and I understand that this is a big commitment. And so I don't want people who are thinking, I can't, I'm super busy, and you're going to want me to meet every month, because that's what I was about to say. And so before I say something like that, I want to be aware of the fact that we set this up as 12 meetings, and people who are on the working group agreed to that schedule. And I am not entirely comfortable asking people to meet more frequently. And again, these meetings will not be reimbursed. So that's on the one side. On the other side is feeling like we're going to be in a position where we may be scrambling at the end to put together a report. And so the value of that report could be significantly enhanced if we were to meet more frequently. Do we need to meet monthly now? I'm not feeling that as much as maybe perhaps a little bit later in the year. I see some hands up, so let's go back around. Susan, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I actually put my hand up with a different comment, but I like that idea of not necessarily having to meet now, but being able to meet later on if we need to. Certainly the value of having a good and useful report that gets library something in the future is so much more valuable than any compensation that could come from anywhere. So I would definitely support that. And I also, going back to the question of taking testimony, I had two comments that I wanted to bring up. One was that I don't know if it's Meg or Karen or somebody from the School Library Association that's doing a really good job of getting testimony from school librarians. I'd love to hear more about how what you're doing on the back end to make that happen. And also, I just wanted to point out that for this topic of collections, I had some things that I really wanted to share that felt important. And even though I'm sitting on the working group and I've seen people giving testimony, the idea of giving testimony felt very intimidating. And what I ended up doing was going back and reading other testimony and saying, oh, okay, I'm just writing something. But maybe we need to do a bit more marketing of what it is that we're looking for, because people might be scared off by the concept of, oh, this is something very formal and official and I don't have time to figure it out and I'm moving on. So maybe we could help people to understand what it is we're looking for and get a broader sense of information from people.
Yeah, it's a fair point, and what I'm seeing is encouraging because because I don't want this to be a Department of Libraries driven process, and I think this is starting to feel more like a group, and that's great. Denise, I know you've had your hand up for a while.
I don't know if I was next or not. I had my hand up and down, and I was just going to say two things. Kind of what Susan was saying, that's a great question. I know we're not getting a lot of feedback from the academic arena, and I don't know if, Maria and I are trying to reach out, and we reach out to the directors of the academic libraries, and then beyond that, I don't know if they're getting it to their colleagues internally, which is one of the reasons I keep thinking, oh, is there a way to do some interviewing or something to kind of bring forth those ideas which are currently not being collected as testimony. And a comment about meeting more, I agree with everyone else, maybe this isn't the time to ramp that up, but I feel like if I'm going to invest this much time already into this group and that report, that I'm happy to invest more time to make sure it's the best it can be.
Yeah, I mean, I'll meet as often as is necessary. So, and I guess by saying that, I'm volunteering the new state librarian for that. So, all right, Meg.
Hi, yeah, thanks. I would agree. I like, Susan, that you raised the issue that even just testimony in of itself could be a barrier to librarians who we desperately need to hear from. So, however, I don't know how Vermont school librarians are a force to be reckoned with. We have a very strong membership in listserv. Asking of librarians during this crucial time when we are short-staffed, when because of COVID, kids are eating their lunches in the library, they're sending kids to the library who don't have coverage for subs. It is pretty precarious right now, and I'm only speaking from the school librarian perspective because I know other sectors and other libraries are experiencing this, and I'm deeply humbled that our members take the time to submit testimony. And we do have some. I want to just remind the working committee that there is testimony in the folder from school librarians who did not testify. So what we found was a majority of our members submitted written testimony, but deferred on the live testimony. And that just could speak to busy schedules, busy days, a lack of subs, a lack of staffing. So hopefully, that that's just going to be an issue for all of us, especially, when you're a librarian and you're on an island of your own and you've got a circulation desk to manage and staffing. So I do want to be cautious. I also don't want to be a martyr. I don't want to volunteer all my time. Compensation is important, and I want to, respect the boundaries, and perhaps we could take some of the testimony times, maybe provide like a morning and afternoon session for 2 different topics. Possibly, I do want to hear from everybody, but using this time to revisit what we're going to investigate and write for the report would be beneficial, because I also agree 2 years down the road, I'm not going to remember that I wanted to talk about decolonizing collections because that was raised for me after listening to testimony. Like, things are going to bubble up. We're going to need to reflect on things, and there's going to be recommendations that we're going to make. And so I do want to honor that. We need to also spend time as a committee working on that. And I don't know what the right answer is, but as a really, really stretched thin school librarian, I don't know if I can devote any more time during my working day. And compensation is important. I think as librarians and as educators, we give of our intellectual time and freedom very, very, very willingly. And I have a son who just got hired by the private sector, and he's compensated quite handsomely for his time. And so I just do want to honor that as well, and still be extremely committed to this work.
Yeah, I think maybe we should see if the Omicron surge fades here, and kind of look at the landscape maybe in 6 weeks. I think for now, let's have the next meeting be March, and we'll do that as a normal testimony meeting. But then perhaps at that meeting we could look at maybe convening in April to do some writing of the report. So pulling ideas together. Karen, you have your hand up.
I wanted to just circle back to Susan had a part in the comment that she made where she asked about why school librarians are submitting more testimony, and I want to offer just one possible explanation. I also agree that I found the idea of submitting testimony to be sounded really intimidating. And so this time around, you'll see this. Some of the school library testimony it's sort of on a form. And so Meg and I went through and sort of tried to pose some guiding questions around collections so that people could write as much or as little as they wanted. And then in our ask to school librarians, we also said, you're welcome to use this form if it makes it easier for you to sort of organize your thoughts. But if you want to submit straight narrative, that is also fine. Or if you want to just testify in person, with no written stuff, that also works. Just having it felt like maybe it would take a little bit of some of the intimidation of sitting in front of a blank page away. So I just wanted to share that seemed to be successful.
Yeah, that's awesome. And we could potentially adopt that model across the board. So yeah, I like that idea. And yeah, I've tried to balance the idea of this being a charged committee from the state with, I know that idea of testimony can be intimidating and uncomfortable. So there might be a way for us to find a middle path there. Wendy.
We have some wonderful listservs in this community of ours. Could we solicit for testimony on that? Well, you do, don't you? That's where it goes, isn't it? Well, and then I ask them to send it to me so I could post it, or I know I think Meg was collecting that stuff for the school librarians. So yeah. Right. There's got to be some other forum that we can ask. I think maybe we do what the school librarians are due. Kelly's leaving. Thanks again, Kelly, for coming. We do maybe what the school librarians are doing and just put out some questions on the listserv and then collect that. That might be a less formal way of doing this. Yeah. So yeah, that's a good point. Susan?
Yeah, I wonder if just having someone besides someone from the Department of Libraries posting on the listserv would also help. I know oftentimes, all right, there we go. And we can point people to the testimony that's already been posted on the Department of Libraries website so people can get a sense of what it is that they're looking for, I would think. Maybe if several of us post on different listservs, see if that makes a big any difference as well.
That would be fantastic. Yeah, and I think we have neglected to post the testimony on our site. That's one thing we overlooked. But we'll get that up in the next few days. It's just a matter of moving the files over, so not a big issue there. But yeah, the more information we get, the better, and just hearing from more people. So yes, by all means, feel free to pick up this charge and run with it. And if you want to interview people, if you want to call someone up and ask them questions and record that, I think that's great. Just please make sure that people understand that what the purpose of this is, what it's, what the testimony is for. And beyond that, I think that we have a lot of potential methods at our disposal. As Andy had mentioned in the first meeting, as someone who I know who collects oral history, there's a lot of different ways that people communicate and learn, and I think it's great to be cognizant of those and meet people where they are. One thing I wanted to mention today is again about we had quite a bit of discussion about audiobooks today. I just want to remind everyone about the Able Library, and please direct any patrons or people that you know to that service who may be eligible for it. And oftentimes people are eligible for it that may not realize that they are. It's relatively easy to qualify if you have a qualifying condition. So, and it can also be a temporary thing if for you school librarians, if a child has gotten some kind of injury, whether they can't hold a book, a sports injury or something, so anything like that, please just direct them to the Able Library, because that service is available for people who also just need it on a temporary basis. So I'm a big booster of the Able Library. I think it's very effective. I have multiple blind members in my family that utilize the National Library Service, and I can tell you that the comment that was made earlier that listening to a book is reading a book. It's the same process. It accomplishes the same thing in the brain. So again, just want to give a plug in for the Able Library. Susan, your hand is up. Is that old?
Sorry, that's an old hand.
Okay. Well, some of us are old hands, but any other thoughts or comments? Well, this was a great meeting today, and again, I want to thank everyone for coming and participating. I know it's hard to take this much time out of your schedule, but I really appreciate it. And hearing the testimony from everybody is it's really gratifying, and it makes being part of this group and the fact that this working group exists really fantastic. So thank you all very much. And we will close the meeting. I don't know if I need to get a second. Are we still doing Robert's rules? I think maybe we threw those out. So
we'll second it. Happy weekend, everyone. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. Nice to see everyone.